Well, good afternoon. It's Matt Coleman, your host for Magnify World. We're back here again talking about the future of health in augmented reality and virtual reality or expanded reality. We'll hear the differences in a moment from two distinguished guests from New York. We have Bourbeau, who's the Director of Immersive Content and Vice President at Studio RX. Studio RX is part of the FCB Health Network. Welcome, Bill. How are you?
Hi, good. Thanks for having me.
That's great. And also his colleague, Mark Steelman from New York as well. He's the head XR developer at Studio RX, has had an extensive background at his age, traveling and educating himself around virtual reality and augmented reality production and the development around that. How are you, Mark?
Thanks for the introduction. Happy to be here.
So, Bill, we're going to hand it back to you. Please let us know how, RX has come about. And you've been with the company now, FCB, for over looks like 10 years with various roles. What was the exciting moment that the company just, put this together? Because you've been out, and when was that?
Yeah, I joined the company in 2010, and I've been working as a 3D animator around the industry in New York for the last 20 years. And a project came about where we had to do a dome experience. And in a past life, I worked as an animator at the Hayden Planetarium. And so I had plenty of dome experience there. So I was able to bring that to the table when we had to execute for a large dome for a project, I think in 2016, 2017. So it was a large project, I think a 50 or 60 foot dome. And it was indoors, it was tilted, and it was called the B-cell dome experience. That was effectively a ride film. It was a cutaway of a B-cell cancer cell, and you were on a journey to look at the science behind it.
Oh, wow. And how many people can fit in that size dome? And were there, is it like a beanbag situation or reclining chairs, or what was the setup in terms of?
It was a standing experience. I think we had about 25, 30 people that could stand under or around in its general periphery at a time. It happened to turn into a large selfie magnet, which was, if however they want to use it. But if people are taking selfies, it must be good.
Yeah, look, I'm a real fan of the 360 dome experiences, as we discussed before the call. And, we were talking about the America's first dome park, actually, theme park. Although they've got 5, it's more based on the location-based entertainment model. But I can really see how, the health and wellness sector of the market can really get their message across in an unusual way, really. How does the multiple projectors work, and what sort of quality can you get inside the dome?
Well, let's see. I think we were feeding a spherical image that was at the time 4K by 4K, 4096.
Okay, so good quality.
Yeah. And it was the quality definitely held up very well. I believe they were using laser projectors, and I think they were doing a hardware stitch. So it was pretty seamless. It worked out quite well. I mean, I remember my days at the Hayden Planetarium that I think we were running a 1500 by 2K at the time on older Barco projectors. They've come a long way since then, but definitely the clarity held up great. And this is in a lit, convention space environment.
Yeah, fantastic. And look, I wanted to start there because you're obviously also developing using 360 video, head-mounted displays, the virtual reality headsets, of course, and range and mobile devices. What can you do now with the lack of live events, or conferences that you can attend? How are you communicating as a company, a health company, with the doctors and your clients? Can you give us some insight how you communicate in using the technology?
We started working on right away. There was definitely a need for virtual meetings. Just the ability to kind of take a conference or even just a classic meeting situation and migrate that over to a shared space, whether it's in VR. I mean, my team holds its meetings in VR every week, sometimes daily. So kind of bringing that to the table and trying to move the industry in that direction, virtualizing the entire experience. And there are some experiences that we've put together in the past. For instance, we We did an escape room that was all physical at the time. And then we were asked to port that over to a VR experience, a shared experience where four people and a docent could join in at once and do that in headsets. Well, the client is shifting gears again and now would like to take that and make it a WebGL experience. So taking the medium and kind of taking the content really and porting it over to a platform that everyone can use. And yeah, everything is going virtual.
Look, just going back to your internal meetings, I mean, what are you doing? Are you interacting how inside an avatar world? Is it are you communicating with people in another country, or are you playing games? I'm kidding.
Well, whatever happens in VR, right?
It stays in VR. I know, VR, I haven't heard of that. That's so only in Vegas.
So in terms of my team, which regularly we're spread out all over the country right now.
Right.
And we have a developer that's working in Portland. So when he wakes up, we all get in. We are doing all kinds of things. We're going through standard team meeting notes, talking through projects. There's a drawing functionality that we can do. We have full hand tracking working that Mark got working with the Oculus Quest. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden with your fingertips you can say so much more. So now that we have all these technical achievements, interacting is becoming easier and easier.
We recently interviewed and we didn't do a review, but we interviewed the head of HP for virtual reality last week, and she was showcasing the new Reverb G2 headset, which is more hyper-realism in terms of quality. What are your thoughts? I probably should ask Mark this just for a moment and get him to say a few words. Have you had a chance to review that yet? I know they're not available. It's coming out this fall, but is that something your team is excited to get into from a development level?
Sure. I mean, the specs on the Reverb are definitely impressive. Personally, haven't had the chance to try the Reverb, but similar headsets are the Vario VR and XR headsets that have extremely high resolution and other optical elements that add to realism. It's definitely really exciting, and I think the Reverb is doing a great job at bringing that level of quality down to a much affordable price point. I can't remember exactly what the Reverb is going for, but it definitely excites us just because you can have that much more immersion when you have really high quality displays and the sound as well. I think the HP worked with Valve to integrate the Steam VR audio into that headset, so I would definitely love to have it in my hands.
Yeah, not too many weeks away then by the sound of it. It's $5.99 I was told, so reasonable. But look, Bill, going back to your communication with your clients, I mean, you've got, first of all, a vast amount of staff working in the US and potentially around the world. I mean, will they eventually use, AR and VR to communicate with each other? Is that one of your standards from the studio that you're trying to achieve in the future? I don't know how many tens of thousands of employees you have, but is there a particular segment of that employee area that you're focused on, training as an example?
Well, that's a good question. I think when you're in VR, you're an active participant versus being a passive participant if you're just on a Zoom call watching somebody else speak and present off of a deck for a long chunk of time. I think it's important that we're cognizant, it's better to serve up this content in bite-sized chunks. It's difficult to kind of ingest a half-hour, 45-minute presentation. So gamifying the experience, especially if we're talking about education, is critical. And I think that, VR is the ultimate empathy machine. I can healthcare practitioner in a headset and they'll watch a 6.5-minute video, whereas I can't pay them enough money to just watch, for a couple minutes if they're just standing in front of a TV set. They're two different worlds. So I think as a communication platform, VR is definitely where it's at for that. And I could also be talking about, a large kind of overhead theater or anything that's engaging the user. It's really making them an active participant that is really going to really sell it.
So let's go back on your comment about gamification for a moment, which I think you're right is key, and is probably an unusual statement in the healthcare business that you're gamifying an education experience. But these new technologies give you that opportunity to basically create those memorable moments, for your clients or your staff. Is there a couple of examples, Mark or Bill, you could give us on how you would gamify, one of your experiences or something that you're working on in the future, or some ideas around that?
Well, starting with the physical, that was, this was at a very large industry event. That room was booked solid for the entirety of the show. That never happens. You don't. It's not like we're at an NVIDIA booth at CES or something like that. This is, we're talking about a different collection of people. Yet, we put 4 strangers together at a time and stick them in a room for 11 minutes and gamify it. And people got really into it. And there was a scoreboard, there was a queuing system, the whole thing worked great. And this was to teach people about the effects of schizophrenia. So that really, sold the client's message.
And Bill, what was the experience? So they were interacting with each other in headsets? Did the escape room have headsets in it, or was more of a dome experience?
What I'm talking about, and Mark can talk more to the VR aspect, because he was in charge of kind of bridging it from the physical to the virtual, was that people would search around the room looking for clues, and they could talk. They'd be sitting next to each other if in VR, because this is a kind of a social exercise for people sitting with a sales rep. That's how the client wanted to build the VR piece. But in the show, same principle. You're turning a bed over looking for clues. Somebody threw something away in a garbage and you don't know where it is.
What a great idea. And it sounds like it was sold out. So that's good. And Mark, what were you going to say about the VR side?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, because it's a physical medium, like the original project was inherently just being in a room and, searching, right? Yeah. There really is no other way to virtualize that kind of experience except in VR, right? You can't quite you can do kind of, an online web game, but to really make you feel like you are in the room of that patient, right? And especially when you add immersive audio and seeing other people virtually, what we did is we had a kind of networked experience, all of that core to replicating that sense of being in the patient's room with other people in a way that I don't think another medium could achieve.
What are some of the other drugs that you could actually showcase and actually, educate, whether it's one of your clients or the general public? I'm not sure whether you do any general public engagement in terms of the studio, but is there, like with COVID as a classic, obviously, we all know what's going on there. Is there something that you could do to showcase? Because there seems to be a lot of, I don't know whether it's misinformation, to be honest, but a lot of opinions, because it's a new world problem, that everybody's got a different, opinion on how, whether you should be wearing this mask or that mask, or whether you should be going out at all, or whether you should be going to the petrol station, let alone go to the supermarket. I'm not asking for any answers on COVID here, but how can we get the right message from your perspective, from your company's perspective, out there in the future?
I can, for instance, we did a medical info piece about endometriosis, and this is a condition that affects half the population of the world. It affects a large percentage of women. We showcase that at Future of Storytelling, which is a large non-medical VR future technology showcase, and people really loved it, and it really resonated with a whole range of visitors, and people had anecdotes about, oh my God, I'm going for surgery for this in a few days. Why are you here? And this is that piece which people would sit down and watch for 6.5 minutes at a time. Sometimes they'd watch it twice. That's unheard of. But it's just, at its simplest form, It's medical information that's really meant for a wider audience than just doctors or nurses. It really applies to us all. So if you're handling storytelling in the right way, it can apply to everyone.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's outside of that, highly engaging experience, storytelling is the key in any market, really, at the end of the day, isn't it? So it's great to see you're championing that as well. Look, I also wanted to ask about using AR and anything you've done on the handheld devices previously, or you're thinking of doing in the future, like an augmented reality app or anything like that. Is that something that you guys would entertain in the future or have done?
Actually done. One of the kinds of stories that we tell is around trial design and basically doing data visualization. And we've used AR app that happened to be on a tablet, which several visitors to a show we'd hand them the tablet and they could literally walk around this kind of experience that draws out in front of them on the tablet. So as they walk around the perimeter of I think a 20 by 20 foot area, cordoned off on the show floor, they would unlock pieces of the story. So there were 5 or 6 virtual triggers that would draw on and tell a little piece of a story about, that drug, how it works, the trials associated with it. And that was pretty successful. Listen, I think that we're going to be using AR more and more in our day-to-day lives.
What about off-the-shelf products in pharmacy, like at CVS? Do you feel that in a position for an AR app from your company that, basically visualizes as you purchase what it actually is? Because there's so many things out there. Consumers will just either Google it or they could basically engage through an app, right? So
first of all, there's device training right off the bat. You could imagine a mobile web AR, like Mark is doing a lot of work with Eighth Wall right now. But imagine a mobile app where you could pull up the device that you're using. For instance, for COPD, you'd have an inhaler, and usually they can be a little complicated. So you're pulling up the inhaler app, and you can swipe through the different way, and it will, draw virtually in front of you, of course. And you can go through a 3-step training on the device and how it works, and learn how the medicine is actually given via that device. So it's great for training. It's also great for visualizing where you might be a patient that has to bring in a home hemodialysis machine or something like that. How do you even hook that up? Well, you can put an AR app together that will basically allow you to kind of fit that machine into your kitchen and see if it literally fits, much as you would if you're looking at furniture on Wayfair.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I can't wait to see all these new innovations hitting the shelf or hitting the market. And Mark, so what's your opinion on the difference between extended reality, mixed reality? I heard another one last week in France, dynamic reality. I don't expect you to answer, but you can throw your opinion out there. And then there's AR and VR. I mean, how do you best explain to your boss or your clients the best way forward, amongst all the jargon?
Sure. I mean, yeah, you're right that there is a lot of jargon. One of the other ones is spatial computing. I mean, it's almost kind of like the age-old conversation of this industry, and it just kind of gives me a headache, just in the sense that you could probably argue about this, what's the right way to describe this or that for hours. But generally, I think extended reality is much more, or XR, as I like to call it, is the umbrella term, where X can kind of just be a variable for augmented, mixed, virtual, but really anything that's just digital enhancement of, your physical space. I think some of the key distinctions, basically researchers have kind of put this on what's called the virtuality continuum, is that you have kind of on the low end of the spectrum, on the base is reality, right? And then you start having digital objects in your reality. So augmented reality typically falls in the category of placing 3D objects in your physical space, on your table, on your floor, walls. And then when you get to virtual reality, it's really where the environment itself is becoming virtual. So if you start replacing the walls and the floor with virtual elements, you have virtual objects in a virtual world. That's where you're kind of in virtual reality. And then mixed reality is a vague term that describes somewhere in between, augmented and virtual reality. But that's kind of the basic breakdown that I like.
Yeah, no, I gave a talk a couple of years ago about the differences between all of them. And at the time, the crux was you cannot play hide and seek in augmented reality because you can't hide behind a tree in AR. But of course, Niantic came out with the occlusion mask, the live occlusion mask a week later. But then my argument, well, that's mixed reality. So,
well, I'm most looking forward to where these smart glasses are going. I mean, that's going to be another area of innovation that you guys are obviously looking at. And there's some early demos of what creative artists are thinking about what Apple's new glasses are going to be. Hyper realism, possibly 8K, 4K, who knows, the higher quality, the better. But at the end of the day, it's going to be down to possibly a connection with IoT, 5G, data delivery, wherever you're walking down the street, down the beach, traffic directions, in the car. I mean, what's your thoughts, Bill, on smart glasses? And then we can get Mark's opinion on his. I'm
astounded by just the speculation around it, but I saw what you're referring to, what could the actual version of a wearable. As long as it's not freaking people out that they feel like they're being spied on. Like the initial Google glasses, it felt like you almost had like a little camera on the side of your head. I think there's something to do with people's sense of security and privacy. As long as that's thought through and handled properly, I think that will go a long way. I certainly think that it will be kind of paired with your mobile handset, and it will start from there. And it will probably also begin with just showing information as opposed to, as Mark was talking about, putting in whales and drawing full 3D scenes at first.
Yeah. Right, Mark, what are you most looking forward to in regards to smart glasses?
I think I definitely agree with Bill on the point of, it's going to start out as an extension of our existing devices and, take the kind of app ecosystem that we already have and, have a new form of that display. You already have smartwatches and your phone, and this is going to kind of be the next device in the ecosystem. But I think where it'll eventually kind of grow past that is when you really start to have applications that you can't get your mobile or other wearable devices. I know Google Maps has shown that kind of example, AR navigation, and you can actually already try that, and it's pretty impressive considering how early it is. But I think eventually, yeah, like you're going to be able to walk down the street, and if you want to learn more about a store, you can, turn on your display and see their virtual products, right in front of you before actually entering the store. And, you can have a phone call with someone and they can do some sort of live volumetric capture, very, Star Wars, Star Trek hologram. Like I think it is eventually going to come. I think that the hard question is when, and that's what we're all trying to figure out.
So I'm glad you brought up volumetric capture, because I don't know whether, your studio has, moved in that space yet, but can you tell me a little bit about what you could do outside of, in the health and wellness area? I mean, you could create a digital twin, I'll throw one out there, of your doctor, and it's a new form of telemedicine, that your doctor suddenly materializes in your lounge room and sits next to you and starts interacting with you. And it sounds absolutely mad, but we're maybe not that far from making that happen. I mean, what are your thoughts on all of that?
One thing that we like to do a lot of is, telemedicine is a perfect example of it. I think another one would be telling patient stories. For instance, I was talking with Mark about this recently, where you could be a patient with psoriatic arthritis. And we could tell a story there about what the patient is going through for physicians, so they really can get a really good understanding of what their quality of life is and what their limited range of motion is. So you can depict that very well using volumetric capture.
But just getting back to I know, Mark, you want to showcase also some gaming engine technology to us, and you've got some slides that you want to talk us through as we draw towards an end to the conversation. But this is interesting because gaming engine, this is all about creating, extended reality and mixed reality and everything else that we've been talking about. I know we're going to focus on Unity and one of their new programs, which I'd like you to explain what Mars is and maybe take us through a few notes on how you use this.
Sure. Yeah. So, augmented reality development has been around for a bit, ever since kind of Apple and Google released their respective AR Kit and AR Core SDKs to allow developers to use their phones or tablets for augmented reality. But I think there's been massive development in the tools that developers can use to create that content since ARKit and AR Core have been released. Unity is one of the primary tools that a lot of developers use, which has a 3D authoring environment and really streamlines the process of pre-visualizing an augmented reality experience before it actually gets to the device and you're testing it. So, as I was saying, Unity is a physics engine, also known as a game engine, and it's a 3D authoring environment that you can use to make a wide variety of applications. But one of their most recent tools that works within Unity is Mars, which stands for Mixed and Augmented Reality Studio, adds a number of key features to what you could already do in Unity to create AR apps, but it really streamlines the process of creating AR experiences by drastically reducing the iteration time. And so one of the key features to doing that is simulating environments within the editor. Because Unity is a 3D engine, you can simulate the kinds of AR environments that you're going to use, an AR app. Beforehand, what you would have to do is, if I wanted to build an AR app that works in my kitchen, in my living room, outside on my back porch, right? I would have to build my app, and then I would have to physically go to all of those places, make sure that it works as expected in each of those physical locations. But what Mars allows you to do is simulate those kinds of spaces. I think it might make sense for me to jump to Unity real quick just to give a visual for what that looks like.
I did have a question when you get there around geolocation, which you're kind of answering, I guess, now, but it obviously it's a streamline into that geolocation because it automates that. Is that what you're saying?
To somewhat. If you're talking about like kind of geo filters and like a wall, like let's say, you're in Times Square, like to know that you're in Times Square, that's one of the many kind of real world features that you can look for with Unity Mars. So, but what I was talking about in terms of simulating environments is this is kind of the example of, this is kind of one of the main viewpoints for Mars, the simulation view. And this is an example of what a kitchen might look like, right? And these are, virtual objects that are getting placed, but these are virtual objects that would get placed in an equivalent real world table or countertop or floor, right? And if I want to switch to, a dining room, I can go to this dining room. If I want to go to a museum, I can see what this looks like in a museum. And basically, this is a super simple scene of just placing virtual objects on a horizontal plane, but it's just showcasing and simulating what it would be like to have that object placement on a plane in different environments with different sizes of planes and different numbers of planes, if you're following me. And so if I wanted to, for instance, just simulate like what it would be like to actually run the app, right? This is kind of the high level editor. I could hit play. Here, I can start to walk around. This is kind of what it would be like if I was moving around with a actual tablet in my hand or something, and this allows me to kind of simulate that movement. Doesn't seem to be picking it up in this environment, but if I go back to the kitchen and I hit play, we should be able to see the objects kind of populating on the table. So this is an example of it scanning, the device in the real world would scan a horizontal surface and create a plane. Right now I'm kind of visualizing, I have a visualizer on the plane, and then once it detects a large enough surface, which I can kind of, I can decide how large of a surface it needs to be before I show an object. And then it can show that object, and that could be an animation like this simple spinning animation, but it could also be, like we've discussed, a kind of it could trigger the start of a data story, and then you could continue walking around the space and have aspects of that data story pop up relative to the environment.
Mark, can it actually emulate different devices?
There is actually a device view. I believe that is a feature that Unity has recently added. I don't think it's explicitly part of Mars, but I think you can pair it with Mars. I don't have it set up in this project, so I can't show you, but yes, like you can simulate, if you wanted to do a certain aspect ratio, right? Like a lot of phones will, the Google Pixel will be wider than the iPhone, or, if you want to then switch to tablet mode, you have a lot more screen real estate to deal with. So yeah, you can do that.
I think it's not only the aspect ratios and the resolutions and that kind of thing, but as hardware is starting to gain like LiDAR cameras and, cameras that are assisting with specifically AR and depth and that kind of thing, it's going to be more and more critical to be able to look at the differences from device to device.
So one of the great things about AR Foundation, which is what Mars builds on top of, is that you have a lot of core AR Foundation features. What it does is it allows you to have features that may be available on one device but not on the other, and it can automatically detect whether the device that you're currently on has the hardware capabilities for those features. So face tracking is a great example. A lot of Android phones may not have that, special depth sensor that you have in the latest iPhones. Have an AR experience that, if you have that hardware capability, allows you to do face tracking, and then if not, it gives you a message saying, sorry, like this isn't available on your device.
Any last comments from Mark? Because I just wanted to try and get some final comments from you guys before we sign off about the future of education and your studio.
Yeah, I just think I'll just list off the last few things I had on this list, which I already kind of covered. But the idea, right, is that Mars, you can kind of set rules, and because you never know when you're building it, or oftentimes you don't know where your experience is going to be used, you need to kind of set rules for those environments. And so Mars makes it easy to do that. You can also record your playthrough, which is super useful. So, which is great for testing for if you know you're going to be in a certain space, you can record the movements that you're going to do in that space and then play that back as you keep adding features to your app if you want to change something. And then, as I already mentioned, the cross-platform functionality is really helpful, because if as a developer, it's a huge pain to have to continuously switch platforms every time you want to build for another device.
Excellent. And Bill, any final comments from you about the future of your studio and what you're trying to achieve?
The playing field keeps on changing, and as long as we keep our eyes open and we just keep on investing in new technologies and remain interested on what's hot, what's coming out, what really works best for us in telling stories for our clients. That's really what it comes down to in the end. But I think we've been given a wonderful opportunity to push the technology forward, the industry forward, by kind of really thinking and rethinking about what the virtual means and how we can leverage it for everyone, not just specific use cases.
Fantastic. Look, Mark and Bill, thanks very much for your time today. It's great to see all the different initiatives that you're doing for the health industry. Well done. And it's exciting how you you're creating different experiences at trade shows, and now you're using VR rooms to translate that internally. So keep it up, and we'll be in touch. And let's sign off for now. And it was great to chat. And thanks about your thoughts on the future of AR and VR and mixed reality for your industry. Thanks again. See you soon.
Have a good one.